Hello. This is a test stream. First time using OBS. Setting it up to see what it'll look like if I do tests with Rive. I don't know what it's going to look like, so I'll click around a little bit and go through some live stuff and just see how it looks. Hello. This is a test stream, and it does look like I'm streaming, so let's see what happens. All right, well, what I'm going to do is click and drive and walk through this animation. This is Rumple. He's on the RiveFlow website. And you can see he's got an idle bounce. You can see his bones here. And you can see his hover interaction. So I was going to start by just kind of walking through how I set this up. Created this character, this illustration in Figma, and copy and pasted it over into Rive, which is super easy to do. And yeah, from there I added these bones. So you'll see I'm using a technique with a target to have the face tracking, and there are several face elements weighted to that. And actually, let me see, what do I have that set up here? Yeah, so you notice there is a hit area that you can't see, but when I leave a certain area, his gaze kind of reverts back to viewing front on. So that was a cool trick that I can walk through at some point if anybody's interested. Let's see. I'm going to put a comment. Doing a test. There we go. All right. So where's my Rive file? Here we go. So you can see the bones moving around. That's really what I'm animating here, is the movement of the bones. And you can see the timelines that I have set up here and the layers in my state machine. So let's walk through what I got set up here. First, I've got one for the blinks. So that's just going to have him blink periodically. What I like about doing this on its own layer is that timing can be set up to function totally independent of any other movements. So I can just have a blink cycle going and not worry about anything else. He's also got a rocking side to side motion happening. You can kind of see that happening. And a bounce motion. Those are happening on two separate layers. They really could be in one, but that's how I set it up in this one. And then waving, here's where we get into the logic. So you'll see I've got a wave input. This is a trigger type. And when you trigger it, the state machine transitions into the wave state and then back to an idle state. And there's also a listener within the artboard where when the cursor enters that area, it's gonna fire that trigger for me. So I've got conditions set up on these. So basically when the condition is when wave is fired, it's gonna transition to the wave timeline, and then it's gonna play that entire timeline 100%. So that's why I said the exit time on the transition back. And then it's gonna stay on this idle stage until it's ready to be triggered again. And in fact, this face idle, it might just, I think I may only be keying the mouth and the eyebrows. I think those are the things that react here, yeah. And then the look, and this is actually keying the strength of a constraint, the strength of a look constraint. So what that means is, I'll show you. So here I've got a target called look target set up, and you can see that's within the face group. And if I'm on design mode, if I were to grab this and try moving it around, actually you can see that I can't because it has a constraint on it. and actually it's two constraints like that. So it's got translation, which is going to be the movement up and down, left and right across the screen, and the distance, which lets you choose a distance within a certain area or outside of a certain area or at an exact distance relative to another target. And this one, it's so it's closer, and you can actually see this. The red circle is the distance area. If I were to move that value, you could see that changing. So that's the distance that target can move within, and that's relative to this one, distance target, which is just a target that's going to stay exactly right there within the face, even though the face is bouncing around, so it's going to move with the face. But it's going to make sure my look target doesn't leave that, because if it does, and let me see if I can actually deactivate that one, that constraint. And what happens if is it going to let me move it? No, I still have another constraint. Maybe if I deactivate both of them. You can see face gets pretty weird if I let it go outside of those areas. So that really helps me keep it within the area. One thing that's important to note is that the order of these constraints is important. They will override each other. So what I will do with that is then also note that the translation constraint set to 100%, and it's tracking to the weighted look target. So that's the one that's up here. My weighted look target is the one that actually follows around the cursor. And on these two timelines, what I'm doing is actually keying the strength of that constraint. So on look 0, the strength constraint is set to 0. On look 100, the strength constraint is set to 100%. So it's actually going to transition between those two things. And that's what lets me set the strength based on whether or not I'm inside the tracking area. And if I leave the tracking area, you'll see that it kind of nicely, slowly has them look back. So I'm setting the strength of it back to 0, which means it just goes back to its default state. And so you can see, basically this is with, if I have it, the tracking, if tracking is on, it's going to do it, and if it's off, and that's controlled by a listener on the artboard itself. So if tracking is true, it's going to do that. And it's got a duration of 400 milliseconds, so it's kind of a nice slow transition. In fact, you can actually see that blue line between those shows you how quickly it moves back and forth. I have it 600 on the way back, so it's even a little bit slower. So it's kind of like, oh, okay, I guess I'm not going to look anymore. I'm going to a little bit more slowly return my attention to the viewer. So that's what that is doing. I also set up a preview loop because when you publish to the community, you can only choose one timeline to be your preview thumbnail. So this is a kind of a combination of a bunch of the motions in once. But like I said, I have this timeline is just the blinks, so you can see what's happening here, only keying the eyeballs. On the rock side to side, it's literally just this torso movement side to side. And on the bounce, I'm keying the up and down. And I'm using an IK constraint here, which gives me that nice little knee bounce out as well. The wave is its own timeline that just goes triggered when it's hovered over. And then face idle, yep, I'm just keying some pieces here. So yeah, making sure the arm IKs return back and that the eyebrows and the mouth are kind of returning to a default state. So that's how I got this one set up. It's got, the bones are really what are controlling everything. I'll go into that another time. But that's how everything is set up here. So you can kind of see where my targets are having the gaze follow. And you can kind of see there's this one that kind of that's staying within the distance constraint. So even though I have one following my cursor, there's one right now, it's on its eyebrow, right? That's as far as that's going to go, so it won't deform the face too much. And then, it'll track right on that spot within the distance area, and then outside of it, it's just going to kind of follow that perimeter of that circle. And then, like I said, when I leave the tracking area, that's when he's gonna look back at the camera. So from there, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up this test stream and be all done. So thanks if you tuned in.